Lab number 264. Now it's time to add security to our adapters, and basically when from the client side there will be a call to adapter and from adapter to backend. Firstly, you need to check user authentication, so meaning you need to provide username and the password, and only after successful this security step you can proceed and perform the actual call. So for that, we will use one of the examples that you can find right in the MobileFirst Operations console in Download Center. So just click on Samples and you will find at the bottom Security Check. We are interested in User Authentication Security Check. And what you can do is that you can close this live reload in terminal because we will test security in emulator, and close that Heroes tab. And navigate to our downloads, unzip what we just downloaded, the user login I mean, and then move user login to our dev workspaces IAM folder and navigate there. We can build this security check using mfpdev adapter build because this is basically adapter with the specific structure. So after build, the same way as with a normal adapter, we can deploy it and it will appear on the server. But the difference will be in the graphical representation is that there will be a specific like a locker nearby the icon here that will actually specify that that one is the security check. So security check is there to verify the credentials, to actually define a way how we will do verification, either do some internal work or some external resources needs to be called. And in our case, this user login performs everything locally. So what it's doing, you can find it in that Java code, that it basically takes the username and the password that is passed as parameters and check if they're equal to each other. So if the username equal to password, then we are done, meaning we passed the security step and we can say that those credentials are correct. In case those are not equal, we are saying that credentials not set properly, and we will repeat that step to actually try to perform the security check again. So the idea is that in order to this security check to be called, we need to secure using the specific adapter, specific procedure, or the whole application. So it is done inside the application settings. For example, if we will go to Android version of our application, there is a security tab, and you can add the mandatory application scope or security checks that needs to be passed during the application startup, so meaning securing the whole app. Or you can perform scope element mapping. So the scope is the way to secure specific things, like for example procedure, with the set of specific security checks that you can map to that scope. So for example, one scope can apply several security checks. And the way how to actually configure that scope is the following. First, we will go to our adapter. Let's start with our JavaScript adapter. So employee adapter, adapter XML has this procedure on which we can say scope will be equal to restricted data, for example, just like that. We can save that adapter, go there, so employee adapter, and perform build and afterwards deploy. So previously in our employee adapter, we had resources secured with the default scope, as you remember. Now it says restricted data. So in order to pass that restricted data, we need to perform a mapping, and that mapping will be done in the security tab. So just select scope element mapping and just let's say that our restricted data will be mapped to user login custom security check. So now whomever will try to access the data will need to pass that check. Just as I said, you can map it to several security checks, either default ones, either the custom ones that you will add. You can map it to nothing. That will mean that you will pass through any security, and that scope will have no security inside. So that specific things can be applied differently per application versions and of course per platforms and so on. So next step, what we need to do is we need to actually do the same for Java adapter. And for Java adapter, we need to go to our resources. And here let's start with import. So we are interested in COM, IBM, MFP, adapter, API, OAuth, security. And now we can use that security to secure a specific endpoint. In this case, it will be that one. And the only thing that we need to specify here is the scope equal specific value. In our case, the same restricted data. Save that file. Let's navigate to our Java adapter. So Java HTTP was the name, and again perform build and afterwards deploy. And again, for Java, you should see the changes on the Resources tab that now specify the security restricted data. And the scope we already have mapped to a security check. So now it's time to work with the client side. And on the client side, basically the way how we need to work is we need to define a handler that will handle this security check. And when we will get inside that handle, we can then do some actions. For example, display the window or just pass the parameters or do whatever else. And afterwards, we will grab that input, meaning the username and password from a user. We will need to submit answer to that challenge. And if that answer will be correct, then we will go through and our code that we initially made before getting in that handler will go through. If not, we will again appear in the same handler and we'll need to work with it. So let's go to our client-side code and we will be working with the app.ts file. I will close everything else that we don't need at this moment. So let's define some new function, something like auth_init. That will be called from init complete, so after we initialized our APIs, somewhere there. Like that. So within this auth_init, we will need to create our security check challenge handler, and for that let's define some new variable, something like, well, let's call it auth handler with the type any. And now we can just say that this auth handler will be holding our WL client dot create security check challenge handler. So you have auto completion and it's really easy to write the code this way. So what we need to provide here is the name of our security check. It's user login. That's it. Starting from this moment, we can catch that challenge that will be sent, and this can be done by typing this auth handler handle challenge, like that. So inside handle challenge, we will need to work with the response, which can be successful or not. So let's firstly define what will happen in case of success. And of course, We can also define some failure, or let's leave it as is. So in case everything will be successful, let's go and perform some simple logging for debug purposes, like for example inside handle challenge. That would be enough. And we will need to grab the credentials somehow. For that, let's use the Ionic alerts, and there is a specific type prompt alert that can prompt us the alert with the fields inside, like username and password, and with the buttons. So let's call that function something like display logging. That will actually show that alert for us, and of course we will need to define it somewhere also. So on the same level, inside auth init display logging, or yeah, actually it's better to have it not on the same level. So within the display login, we need to create that login. In order not to write everything, you can check, for example, Ionic version 2 documentation for the components, and we are interested in alerts. So down there is example of alerts usage, and we are interested in prompts, and we can just copy the whole code of that prompt alert example. And the main idea is that firstly we define the alert, and then we present it using the nav, which is the reference to nav controller. There will be some issues with the reference, but let's firstly define the alert. So we need to add a reference to alert. It can be taken from Ionic Angular down there, alert. So now the title can be still login. We need 2 input fields instead of 1. So one will be for the username, second one will be for password. So here we'll have username, placeholder will be username, and the second one will be password, and placeholder will be password. And because the password should be hidden, we will specify that type will be password, just like that. It is enough to have one button. Let's call it something like, for example, login. It should be fine. And here some login inside for debug purposes, like trying to auth with user, and then we can access that sync from data username, which is the name of our input. So the value will be taken and placed inside the data. And of course we will need to submit the answer to the security check. For that we will use the value from the data, and we will pass it as the parameters to this answer. So this auth handler submits challenge answer, and passing our data inside. And finally, we will need to present that alert that will create something like this, like in examples. But because nav is not known, we will need to define that. So there are a few steps that we need to do. So the first one will be to add a reference to app and specify it here. Like that. And the next step will be to work with the lifecycle events, because we are in app.ts and the nav controller will be loaded after our view init. So we will need to wait for that, cache that event, and afterwards we can get active one. meaning of course active navigation. So for that we can use lifecycle events and g after view init, for example. And inside we can just say that this nav will be equal to this app get active nav, just like that. And of course, because we reference in this nav, we need to add that as a variable with type any, of course, like that. So we will get the navigation down here after view init. So then when our code goes to the display login, we will catch that and we will display the alert once the user will fill the username and password and click the login button. We'll submit the challenge answer, and that's call that was initially made to our adapter that was staying like in a queue in between we were doing those challenges and answers will get completed and we'll get the answer, hopefully. So let's check all of that, and firstly let's take a look on our gulp. We shouldn't see any errors, and we don't. Cool. Next step for us will be to type Android AVD, which will launch the Android Virtual Device Manager for us. And from here we can start the Android emulator. So just click Start and make sure you specify this checkbox, Scale Display to Real Size, otherwise it will be too big. You can play with those values to adopt it to your screen, because you cannot scale it afterwards in between, I mean during the emulator work. So let's wait until emulator will finish loading. I will just move it to this part of the screen, and I will set title here as emulator for that window. So this is first step, and one more step after emulator will finish loading, we will need to launch the app on a device. So we have two options. The first one is to build using either Ionic, either Cordova, it doesn't really matter. So perform something like Cordova build Android, and then run it on device using, again, either Ionic, either Cordova command line interface, because Ionic is just the wrapper. So Cordova run or Cordova emulate Android. And each time we will do a change in application code, we will need to rebuild and redeploy. So that was the first option. And the second option is to use the same kind of live reload server, but on real device. So Ionic has one, but again, it has no clue about our plugins and so on. So there is the separate package that was developed by Carlos Santana that called CDV Live. And that one is really cool because it actually brings you the live reload server on the physical device or on emulator, it doesn't really matter. That applies the changes the same way as you just saw it in the browser. So to work with that, we need firstly to navigate back to our client-side project, so Advanced Messenger, and then type cdv live Android. So now it will launch that live reload server on port 3000, and whatever you will do with the code, each time you will click save, firstly it will go to gulp, so it will apply the latest changes and then place it inside the www folder, from where it will be taken by this live reload, and we will see the changes in our mobile application. So if you're doing it first time, I mean launching your app with the build, with everything, it may take a while, like in our case. So sometimes it's taken even a few minutes, but normally the second, third launch and rebuild is of course really fast. But I mean the second, third launch from scratch will be less than 20 seconds. That will be a normal timing, but of course it really depends on the speed of your PC. So let's wait until this process will finish. Okay, So we have our application running. You see no data, but that's what was expected. Let's take a look on our inspect devices tab. So there will be Chrome, inspect devices, and we can open the console logs. We don't need a device view, we have it locally. So let's take a look on what's happened. So we actually have the application in it, we have MFP API in it, everything was fine until the schedule provider load, and then it tries to go to localhost 4567 schedule, which definitely is not the right localhost. So let's go and modify that code and see how those changes will apply using live reload. So instead of localhost, we need to know our IP address. Let's set title for this terminal window to live reload, for example, and open one more and just type asbin and ifconfig. So my IP address is this one, yours may be different, so make sure you will use yours instead of just copying mine, for example. So now I can save this one, and let's wait until gulp will finish reloading, and then the live reload, you see it's doing the Cordoba prepare and it's updating the files, and in a second we should see the relaunch of our application with applied changes. Yep, so we got one step forward, and now we have an issue with again access control allow regions, so the same as we were having in previous labs by doing the call from local domain to external domain, and that is done in this second part when we are doing the call to Google APIs. And we will fix it later on because we will implement this call through the adapter the same way as we did with others too. But it will be later on, so for now what we will do in order not to see this error is to go to schedule page TS file, and down there when we get in the response from schedule load, we will comment the schedule calc function here and just click save on schedule TS file. And again, the same idea, waiting for reload and see what will happen. Okay, now it's time to check our security. So let's click on News tab, for example, because as you remember, that one is secured with the security check, and we got an error. So let's take a look what happened. We got inside handle challenge, and then immediately we got failed to load data and news loaded. So something was wrong with our handle challenge and with our navigation. So let's take a look. So in our app.ts, we got inside our handle challenge. Afterwards, we displaying the login, we creating the alert, and we're presenting the alert with different name because we copied it from documentation. So in our case, it should be prompt like that. Let's wait until reload will finish. And now we have the login window. So let's try to type the wrong credentials, meaning not equal to each other. We got back again to the login window, which is fully fine and expected, but we need to see some error message, meaning something like something wrong was happening or whatever, that will show us that we did something wrong. So we'll modify that, and for now let's try to enter the correct credentials. I will go with Q in uppercase and click login. And yes, we got the response from a server and we got our data loaded in the news tab. So what we can do with that error message? Let's take a look on our example security check that we took from examples. I mean, user login. So down there we have several things. So first one is that we're constructing the error message in case something went wrong. And second is that we also put in the remaining attempts, meaning there will be a specific number and there will be a limit also set in our XML files using properties, how many attempts are allowed, how much time to wait, and so on. But the idea is that if we will try to access that error message and remaining attempts, we can put information about that right in our login window. So let's go back to our app.ts, to the place where we got inside the handle challenge, and before we actually going to display login. And let's do the simple check if we have this response error message, just as it was stated there. Then we will actually construct that simple error message. So let's define a variable, something like message, and that one will be taken from our response error message. Plus, let's go, because this is the simple HTML, let's go with the new line, and afterwards we will add the current value of message. And we will have some additional ones, something like remaining attempts and some specific number that again can be taken from our response remaining attempts, just like that. And now, when we call in this display login, we can pass that message inside as the input parameter and take it here. And for example, replace this message with the message that we had, like that. Now we can save this app.ts and see what will change. So let's click on news, and yep, we have here the issue with the typing. Just remaining attempts. So the same way as it was here in the challenge in the security check. So let's just copy those values, it will be easier. Error message is the same, and remaining attempts is like this, the same. Yeah. So let's save it and try again. And yep, now we see those messages like wrong credentials and so on. And we will get inside after successful login, just as expected. So basically that's all on this step. We finished our lab connected with security, and we'll continue development next labs. Thank you.